Good morning, everyone. Melissa, can we just do a sound check?
Loud and clear, Mark.
Good, thanks very much. Okay, good morning, everyone. Greetings from Isdell House in Dunkeld West, Johannesburg, in the Lewis boardroom, and joined by a number of our board members. So thank you very much for your time this morning, and also to the many people who've joined us from around the country, and also to a number of people who've joined us from around the world. Particular welcome to one of our 4 honorary patrons, Pamela Isdell, who's joining us from France. So Pamela, thanks very much for taking the time to be with us this morning. Okay, just a little bit of information before I hand over to our chairman. Firstly, if you have any questions or comments, you're welcome to type them into the chat room. We will do our best to keep an eye on the chat room, and Melissa will alert me to any messages that need to be answered. We're not expecting load shedding in Dunkeld West this morning, but in the event of load shedding, we will lose power to the boardroom and also to our server. We will then start up the generator. It'll take us about 10 minutes to do so. So can I just ask you to please just rejoin the AGM about 10 minutes after we do lose power. If you do experience any technical difficulties during the AGM, please contact Isabel. She is here at Isdell House with us. She will take your phone calls to her cell phone or to her to our landline at Isdell House, or you can also email her if you have a problem. We'll be recording the AGM and we will upload it onto BirdLife South Africa's YouTube channel within a week. Okay, now to hand over to our chairman, Philip Glenicross. Thank you, Philip.
Good morning to you all. It is gratifying to see that there are so many of you that have taken time out to be with us this morning. As Mark mentioned, we have a strong representation of board members and trustees in the boardroom. And in order not to disrupt proceedings, they've all promised to remain as quiet as church mice. If this does not happen, our secretary, Isabel Hume, is ready to implement the Isdell House mouse eradication project. We have apologies from Manuela Kroch, our honorary treasurer, and Andrew Mitchell, our chairman of the Audit and Risk Committee, as well as a few other members. Mark, can we just have a look at the names on the screen? Apologies from the people on the screen as well. Okay, the first item on the agenda is the confirmation of the minutes of the 92nd AGM. These minutes have been circulated and posted on our website. And if I can please ask for a proposer and seconder for the confirmation of the minutes. David Lawrence proposed, and a seconder, Linda Hart. Then we can move on to item 3, matters arising from the minutes of the 92nd AGM. If there are any matters arising that are not covered under the agenda, if you could just please post it in the chat room now. Just give you a couple of minutes for that. Is there anything, Mark?
Don't see anything.
Okay, we have got a very comprehensive agenda, so I think we'll move on to the item 4, which is the report back on the special general meeting held on the 10th of March 2022. The minutes of that meeting have been circulated by our company secretary, Isabel Hume. That was done on the 11th of April, and it confirmed that all proposed changes to the constitution were approved. One of the changes approved was to paragraph 8 of the Constitution relating to the composition of the board. And I will deal with this further during my chairman's report, as well as under item 10 of the agenda. And I wish to thank all the members who participated in that meeting and supported the amendments. Okay, as far as the chairman's report for 2021 is concerned, I'd like to just mention that we have spent a considerable amount of time over the past 6 years in establishing a governance structure for the organization, which I believe is critical for a sound foundation in which to operate. We have based this on the guidelines set out in the King Report on corporate governance. In terms of the Constitution, the board is the primary authority and decision-making body of the organization that determines strategy and oversees its business and operations. The board also assists the chief executive officer and his management team where appropriate in the execution of the duties to manage the organization. The board currently consists of, first of all, our CEO, Mark Anderson, myself as the chairman, Manuela Kroch as the honorary treasurer, as well as Fani du Plessis, our chief financial officer, who has recently joined the board as a result of the changes in the constitution. Welcome on board, Fani. Up to now, there have been 3 positions available for regional forum representatives on the board. Yvonne Pennington has represented the Northern Bird Club Regional Forum, and Peter de Waal, the KZN Regional Forum. The third position has unfortunately been vacant for some time. Due to the changes to the Constitution, Yvonne and Peter's terms have come to an end. Yvonne, who currently fulfills a vital role in our organization as the fundraising committee chairperson, is standing for re-election as a member's director today. And I sincerely hope that she will be able to rejoin our board after this meeting. I would like to take this opportunity of paying tribute to Peter's contribution over the last 5 years. And I hope that we will be able to utilize his unique abilities in a different role going forward. Thank you very much, Peter. We also have positions for 6 co-opted board members, and these positions are currently filled as follows. Kgaleboya Modisapodi is a lawyer and human resource professional. Ishmael Barat has got a business science degree and manages a large family-owned hospital group in Cape Town. Linda Hart has an MBA in business administration. David Chamberlain, who owns and manages a large hardware retail operation, is a renowned book publisher, and he's also chairman of the African BirdLife magazine committee. Vernon Head, who has not only won prestigious awards as an architect, but he's also an acclaimed author. And Nick Funda, who has a master's in environmental management, and is a member of senior management at Sandparks. Needless to say, they were all passionate conservationists and birders as well. In order to assist the board in the execution of its duties, a number of board committees have been formed, and these are, as you see on the screen, the Audit and Risk Committee, chaired by Andrew Mitchell, the Fundraising Committee, chaired by Yvonne Pennington, our Nominations Committee, chaired by our independent chairperson, Imran Vanka, as well as the Remuneration Committee, chaired by myself. The BirdLife National Trust was established in 2012 to manage and invest funds and other assets on behalf of BirdLife South Africa, with the objective of ensuring the long-term sustainability of the organization. The trustees, as you see on the screen, chaired by David Lawrence, currently control and manage 25 million rands worth of assets, including our office building here at Isdell House. The Malmesbury Marion NPC is a non-profit company that was specially set up to execute our responsibilities in terms of the Memorandum of Understanding that we have with the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment to ensure a successful mouse eradication project on Marion Island. This is the most significant project ever undertaken by us and has a budget of upward of 300 million rand. And as you will note, there are a significant number of independent directors that are independent of BirdLife South Africa represented on the board, which is chaired by Mavusa Msimang. This has been done for strategic reasons, as well as for the specialized knowledge and expertise that these board members bring to the board. My chairman's statement, which you will read in the 2021 annual report that will be released shortly, highlights the tipping point that we have reached as a species inhabiting our planet. The current unsustainable pressure we are exerting on our planet is placing at least 1 million species, including ourselves, at risk of extinction, and we are desperately running out of time. One of the species that we are desperately concerned about is the African penguin, which seems to be starving itself to extinction, and we sincerely hope that its plight can be improved urgently through the collaboration of all stakeholders. The next decade will be critical not only for the penguins, and we will all need to keep fighting to save our natural environment and ourselves in the process. There are encouraging signs of a realization in the boardrooms of business corporations, amongst bankers, financiers, and investors, that it is no longer business as usual. Business will need to account for the way that it makes its money. Maximizing profits in an exploitative way is no longer acceptable. A business's social contract will now demand that it operates in a sustainable manner and must contribute meaningfully to the move to a carbon neutral society by 2050. It is also time for the governments of the world to urgently embrace this requirement in future policy decisions, and it is up to each one of us to demand this. BirdLife International was founded in 1922, and its declaration of principles was for united action, knowing that more could be accomplished by organizations working collectively in combating the threats to birdlife and its habitats. This year marks its centenary, and there are now 117 BirdLife partners, including ourselves, working collaboratively across every continent. Active conservationists, once counted only in dozens, now number in the millions, with 10 million supporters of the BirdLife Partnership alone, and every one of you, our members, contributes to this number. The annual report will also contain the 2021 organizational review, the conservation work review, and the board's self-assessment, which are part of our governance process. I'm pleased to confirm that the outcome of all three reviews were positive, and I would like to take this opportunity of congratulating Mark and each and every member of our staff on another successful year. I must also thank our board members and the members of our board committees for their contribution of time and energy, entirely on a voluntary basis. In conclusion, I would like to express my gratitude to David Allen for performing the conservation work review, as well as to our patrons, donors, funders, our bird clubs and members for your continued support. I'm now going to hand over to our Honorary President, Anusha Chinsami-Turan, for her President's address. Anusha, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm absolutely delighted to be here on the occasion of the 93rd AGM of BirdLife South Africa. Thank you very much for all of you that are joining from around South Africa and from around the world. As you can see, I'm here in person, but given the uncertainties that we are facing in terms of load shedding, I've pre-recorded my talk. So I'm going to ask Melissa to please play my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Anusha.
It's a pleasure. Good morning, everyone. I'm absolutely delighted to tell you about a little bit of my research on the extinct thunderbirds of Australia. Now, I'm sure most of you, or some of you, may remember that I generally work on birds from deeper time, that is, things like Confucius ornis that are considered to be Mesozoic birds. But over the past few years, I've increasingly become interested on extinct giant birds. Some of these come from the Cretaceous, like Gargantua-avis, but others, like the Aepyornithids, which are the elephant birds, are from Madagascar, and the Phosphorussids are from South America. I've also worked on the dodo, and I'm going to tell you today about the work that I've done on the thunderbirds, Dromonis and Genionis. So a lot of this, some of this work has been published, but there's also some really new work that we are currently busy with. So today, as you know, the largest flightless birds are ostriches, and male ostriches can stand about 2.8 meters in height, and they reach body masses of about 156 kilograms. They are actually small compared to the thunderbirds. We we think that the Dromonas sturtoni, the largest of the mirang birds or the thunderbirds, reached heights of about 3 meters, and they probably weighed as much as about 528 kilograms. This is average body mass of about 528, with some of the largest, we think, reaching up to about 600 kilograms. The Dromonathids lived from about 8 million years ago, and they went extinct about 30,000 years ago. They are known from the Australian fossil record, and they are at least 4 genera recognized, and there are 8 species that are known. So from the Paleogene right up to the Pleistocene, we find their fossils. Genyornis is the last of the Dromonathids, and it went extinct about 30,000 years ago, actually coincident with the arrival of humans. The largest of all the Dromonathids are the Dromonas sturtoni, and they were around in the late Miocene. Don't worry, you don't have to read this cladogram. I just wanted to point out to you that the Dromonas sturtoni, or basically all the Dromonas, belong in the clade Gastornithiformes, and this is a sister clade to the Galliformes. Here you have on the left a reconstruction in the background of Dromonas sturtoni, and in the foreground an ostrich, so you can see the size comparison. And on the right you see bones of a femur of an adult and a femur of a juvenile Dromonas, and below are the tarsometatarsals of Dromonas. So the first work that we did involved a landmark geometric morphometric study of the bones of Dromonas sturtoni, and we found that these birds were sexually dimorphic, with females having an average body mass of about 451 kilograms, whereas males reached about 528 kilograms. The bone tissue showed that the juveniles grew very rapidly, very fast, and there's a huge amount of blood vessels that permeate through the bones. As they get older, we found interesting changes in the bone tissue. So we found, as you can see in this case, there were 3 alternating bands of bone tissue that are called lamellar bands or laminar bands of bone tissue, which suggests that they had a periodic slowing down in the rate at which they grew. In some of them, there was actual stoppage or arrests in growth that are very clearly visible as lines of arrested growth. And in 5 out of 21 of the bones, we found a very distinctive bone tissue called medullary bone. This is the bluish tissue that you can see, and here's a higher magnification of that tissue. And this is a very particular bone tissue that is formed in female birds when they are ovulating. And this tissue, the calcium from this tissue, is utilized for egg shelling. So when the birds lay their eggs, they calcify their eggs using calcium from this medullary bone tissue. We also were able to identify when growth stopped, because there was very distinctive bone tissue called the outer circumferential lamellae, and this told us when they reached the adult body size. So to summarize, we can say that Dromonas experience cyclical growth. They reach sexual maturity before skeletal maturity. We also know that they took about 15 years to reach adult body size. So they have this very long, prolonged life history strategy. And we think that their growth strategy is related to the prevailing environmental conditions of the time. And we also propose that the slow growth or arrest in growth may have occurred during the summer months. And we see this is the way in which kangaroos grow. They also experience severe temperatures during the summer, and this affects their rate of growth, which is visible in their bone tissues. I just want to end off by saying that this work is still ongoing, and my colleagues in Australia from Flinders University are actively excavating more Dromonas and Genionis material, and hopefully we will get more material to work on. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Anusha, for your really fascinating and interesting presentation. It's an absolute honor for us to have you as our honorary patron, honorary president, and we'd like to thank you for all the time that you dedicate to our organization. Thank you very much. We do appreciate it.
Thank you from me too, Anusha. Found it very, very interesting and stimulating talk. And I'd like to now hand over to our CEO, Mark, for the CEO's report. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Philip. Okay, so a few of our staff will report on some of the highlights of the organization's work. We have a pre-recorded presentation, which is just over half an hour long. But before they do so, I'd just like to make a few comments about some of our recent work. So 2021 was another good year for the organization, despite the challenging circumstances. And I'm pleased to say that BirdLife South Africa has continued to weather the COVID storm, and I believe that we've done so well. We've raised the funds we need to keep our staff employed and our projects going. And in fact, we've employed additional staff and we've started new projects. I need to, in particular, acknowledge the contributions of our organization's staff. Our conservation team are making very important contributions to the conservation of our country's birds and their habitats, and our core staff provide excellent administrative support that allows them to undertake their work. But how have we been successful during the most difficult of times? There are a number of reasons, I believe, but I saw a little quote by Pele, the Brazilian football player, and I think that summarized it quite well. Success is no accident. It is hard work, perseverance, learning, studying, sacrifice, and most of all, love of what you're doing or learning to do. And I think that quite aptly describes our organization and particularly our staff. I suppose we've had a bit of a luck along the way, but I think that pretty much summarizes what we've done. We've worked very hard and we've persevered. And this is not only because we love what we do, but also because we realize that there's so much at stake. The future of our country's birds and the world's birds need organizations like BirdLife South Africa to be successful. And failure is definitely not an option. This picture of all our staff, I think barring one, was taken at Dunkeld Nature Reserve when we had our annual staff meeting earlier this year. We produced an infographic, which some of you may have seen on our website, has been emailed around, which summarizes some of the successes during 2021, using numbers to talk about these successes. And for those who haven't seen it, you can go onto our website. There's a banner on the home page. You can click on the banner. It'll take you to the page with this infographic. I believe that BirdLife South Africa has, over the past few years, become one of the leading conservation NGOs in South Africa. We're a leading expert in many areas, in red listing, in KBAs, in OECMs, and in biodiversity stewardship. And we're doing work now in many habitats around the country. Our grassland conservation work benefits larks, particularly some of the endemic larks. Our estuary conservation work in the Western Cape protects waders. Our wetland conservation work, particularly that what we're doing in the grasslands, Bellstrom, KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Free State, look after white-ringed flufftails. Our vulture safe zones are protecting vultures. Our marine IBAs are protecting both coastal seabirds and pelagic seabirds. And the East Atlantic flyway work that we're doing is protecting migratory birds. As Philip mentioned earlier, one of our really most important projects at the moment is the Mouse-Free Marion project. It's a project that's being undertaken in collaboration with the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. And we're preparing to undertake one of the world's most ambitious bird conservation projects. If we can eradicate mice from Marion Island, millions and millions of seabirds will benefit. We're also a world leader in other areas, in birds and renewable energy, impacts of lead and vultures, developing habitat suitability models for many of our species, and mitigating seabird bycatch in both the trawl and longline fisheries. We also work with communities through our Empowering People program, with learners through our environment education work in Bakkerstroom benefiting, and also our guides contributing significantly to aviary tourism through our world-acclaimed Community Bird Guide project. We reach a wide audience through our impressive social media work, our clever roadside billboards, our Bird of the Year initiative, and African BirdLife, which is regarded as one of the world's top bird and birding magazines. And for those who are concerned about receiving the magazine, we are definitely dealing with this. We're engaging with the company that does the distribution to see whether we can improve on the distribution of the magazine to our members and our subscribers. BirdLife South Africa also hosts top events such as the African Bird Fair. We had our third Flock at Sea earlier this year, Flock to Marion, and it was very successful. And I think this probably ranks as one of the most ambitious and then ultimately one of the most successful birding events ever undertaken in Africa. We also pride ourselves on our good corporate governance and our impeccable financial administration. And I need to particularly thank our core team and particularly our finance team for the great work that they do. At the end of 2021, we ended with a small financial surplus, the 12th consecutive year that we've done so. These surpluses, as well as donations and bequests, are managed by the BirdLife National Trust. These investments continue to grow and will continue to grow in future. And in this graph, you can see the red line is our income. For the last 12 years, the income has always been above expenditure. The green bar indicates the money that we spend on conservation and the blue on admin. You can see in the latter years, we've spent a similar amount of money on admin, and also makes up about a third of our expenditure. Many people and organizations contribute to our success, and it really is a team effort. I'd like to thank BirdLife South Africa staff once again, our board of directors, the board subcommittees, the trustees of the BirdLife National Trust, particularly the chairman, David Lawrence, who's here with us today, our honorary patrons, Pamela Isdell and Gaynor Rupert do wonderful work for our organization. It's nice to have Pamela at the AGM, our volunteers, affiliated bird clubs, and our members. We couldn't do this work without the funding that we received from project donors, from corporate members, Conservation League donors, Golden Bird patrons. We really like to thank you for all the support that you provide. We also have many, many collaborations from a range of organizations, but as a BirdLife partner, we appreciate the support we receive from the Secretariat in Nairobi, the Regional Secretariat, as well as the Global Secretariat in Cambridge. We're a proud partner of BirdLife International. We appreciate the support from the RSPB, the Fitzpatrick Institute, WWF South Africa, SANBI, and Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries. I'm now going to play the recording, and Melissa, if you can mute me when it's on. And this is just highlights of some of the work that our organization's been involved in.
Hi, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to briefly talk to you today about the work and successes of BirdLife South Africa's Conservation Division. We are fortunate to have an incredible team of dedicated conservation scientists and are proud to report that since the Conservation Division restructure at the start of 2020, all 6 program manager positions have now been filled. During this past year, we were joined by Dr. Alan Lee as head of the Science and Innovation Program. Dr. Simi Bazeng was promoted to Regional Conservation Program Manager, and Nandi Tabela joined us as the Empowering People Program Manager. This youngest program at BirdLife South Africa has a strong focus on people and livelihoods. An analysis of BirdLife South Africa's focus on seabird and land bird species over the past 11 years show a remarkable increase in the number of threatened and endemic species that benefit from our species-focused conservation efforts. On the land bird side, these numbers shown on the graph exclude the species benefiting through biodiversity stewardship. And by the end of 2021, we've also completed 63 habitat suitability models for our threatened and endemic species. Since 2013, we have supported the declaration of 200,000 hectares of habitat, adding to South Africa's conservation estate. This includes 90,000 hectares in the grasslands, 55,000 hectares of estuaries, with a further 45,000 hectares currently in progress. Adding to our protecting ecosystems work is the declaration of vulture safe zones. To date, we have declared 4 vulture safe zones with another 2 in progress. 2 of these are in Mozambique. With that, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to our donors, our supporters, and also collaborators. Following on from our presentation, various program and project managers will give you a short update on some of our other conservation successes. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. My name is Isdell House, and I'm BirdLife South Africa's Estuaries Conservation Project Manager in the Western Cape. Estuaries are one of South Africa's most valuable but vulnerable ecosystems. In the Western Cape, we have 4 of South Africa's top 10 most important estuaries for conservation, and all 4 have little or no formal protection. Estuaries are in fact South Africa's most threatened realm, in part due to their lack of protection. Working with government partners, we have identified 12 priority estuaries, and with the assistance of local stakeholders, are developing processes for the formal protection of these estuarine coastal waters. We also work to protect the wider estuarine functional zone, and that means working with the riparian landowners on privately or communally owned land, using the tools of biodiversity stewardship, voluntary agreements that recognize and protect high biodiversity value lands. Primarily, we work at the Verlorenvlei, Berg, Bot and Klein River estuaries, and currently we have just under 8,000 hectares of threatened estuarine and fynbos habitat being declared as protected areas under the Protected Areas Act. Our project is also involved in area maintenance and in the restoration of estuarine and fynbos habitats, so important to providing tangible benefits to landowners in the local community. We have an estuarine habitat restoration pilot project running at the Berg to assist landowners with their bankside erosion issues in environmentally sound ways. The project co-funds a number of alien clearing teams, including training, with more than 11 kilometers of river cleared this last year. Shaping estuarine and protected area policy is an important part of the project, as is our role in defending our priority estuaries through the environmental authorization processes. We are also involved in monitoring and research, and particularly in analysing and translating this information for our government partners. And we get involved in a great deal of awareness raising around the value of estuaries and their important bird life, including some wonderful educational events, pictured here, one from World Wetlands Day at the Berg this year. Lastly, I am also involved in another project based in the Western Cape with colleagues Melissa Whitecross and Brahma Marie, looking at recognizing, assessing and reporting OECMs. OECMs, or other effective area-based conservation measures, is a conservation designation for areas that are achieving the effective in situ conservation of biodiversity outside of protected areas. And this includes many of the options available through biodiversity stewardship, some of which are shown on this map. Together with protected areas, OECMs will contribute to South Africa's conservation estate and go towards meeting our Aichi targets under the Convention on Biological Diversity. This pilot project has a number of objectives, including identifying and assessing potential OECMs in the province, quantifying the capacity and resource requirements required to undertake this objective, and providing skills development. Thank you for your attention.
Hi everyone, Andy Wassing here, Communications Manager at BirdLife South Africa. It's my pleasure to share some of our communications work with you, as well as how we're using it to broaden our reach and make people aware of birds and bird conservation. I thought I'd start with some of our top level aims as a communications team. And those are to keep growing our community, which includes our social media footprint, members, magazine subscribers, and more people generally interested in birds and bird conservation at the end of the day. Also to raise awareness about the important conservation work we're doing and to keep our members and our community informed of this work happening every day on the ground. Importantly, we'd also like to broaden our community in order to inform and inspire more South Africans about birds, birding, and bird conservations, especially from a geographic, age, cultural, and language point of view. And now on to some notable highlights. As many of you may have seen, we ran a 25 years, 25 successes campaign, highlighting some of the organization's achievements in its 25-year history as BirdLife South Africa. The campaign was well received, reaching almost 200,000 people and raising over 400,000 Rand in the process. Last year, our website had over 100,000 users and 300,000 page views, and we are on track to surpass that performance this year. We also experienced email open rates and click-through rates that are double the industry benchmark, the result of engaging content and an interested, invested community. Our social media pages are growing well, with our BirdLife South Africa Facebook group especially growing rapidly, sometimes by 100 or more members a day, and now sitting at almost 62,000 members. On the media front, we have great ongoing relationships. We're very fortunate with journalists and media houses who jump in and help us get the message out there as soon as possible about some of our bird conservation projects. Already this year, we've featured in a number of big local and international media pieces and platforms, some of which you can see below as examples. Last but not least, I mentioned that one of our most important goals is to broaden our audience in order to share our love of birds, birding, and conservation with more South Africans. So I'll hand over to my colleague Bongi to tell you a bit more about that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy, and hello, everyone. My name is Boinhlanhla Gqabashe, and I'm the communications intern at BirdLife South Africa. Today, I'd like to tell you about some of the exciting things that we have been up to and how we plan on using communications to extend our reach to our communities at large. Firstly, we've been spending most of our time translating our content to make birds and birding more accessible to people in their home languages such as isiZulu and isiXhosa. Some of these examples can be found in our social media posts, Bird of the Year educational material, and a billboard that is coming out in June. Secondly, we want to connect more with the community at large, from thanking the Cortex security officers who rescued an Egyptian goose that was caught in a fishing line, to showcasing an inspiring artist by the name of Oliver Matamba. We're also going to be creating more content that caters to and encourages people who are just starting to show an interest in birding, nature, and conservation. For example, our Dawn Chorus feature launching on Fine Music Radio in June, which introduces listeners to bird calls. Inspiring the next generation of our young birders and conservationists is also very important to us, and we hope to do so through some more innovative content, such as having fun with trivia and quizzes, leveraging more video content in the form of social media trends, and also experimenting with content that the youth are using, such as Instagram stories, Reels, YouTube, and etc. That's it from us, the communications team. Thank you so much for having us today, and we hope to see you on our social media platforms or at the African Bird Fair. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Today I'm going to present very briefly on some of the progress made in African penguin conservation by the Coastal Seabird team at the Seabird Conservation Program, including developments with island closures. So just to give some context to our efforts in conserving the African penguin, it's well known that one of the key drivers of the African penguin population is the availability of their prey. They're specialized foragers that feed predominantly on sardine and anchovy, and their population is well correlated with the abundance of this prey. So a lot of our efforts are centered around mitigating the availability of that prey to these birds. And one such project, which was instigated more than a decade ago, was the island closure experiment at 4 islands, 2 on the west coast, 2 on the southeast coast. And this was to look at the impacts of purse seine fishing, competition on available prey for African penguins around some of their largest colonies. The results of this experiment were published by Richard Shirley and other authors in 2018, and they show meaningful impacts of purse seine fishing on African penguins and therefore benefits of island closures to African penguins. Since this date, we have been advocating together with other NGOs and academics to the Department of the Environment to implement longer-term closures based on these results. That call was heeded by the Minister Creasy last year when she published a proposal for island closures in August 2021, subject to further engagement with stakeholders, which included ourselves, WWF and SANCOB, which were involved in an extended task team that was developed by her department to gauge the efficacy of those proposals in terms of their benefits to African penguins, but also the costs to industry. This process is still ongoing, and we hope to have further feedback by the end of this year for longer-term beneficial closures to breeding African penguins. On another front, and just as important, is our investigations into where African penguins go outside the breeding season. So this is work headed up by Tegan Carpenter-Kling, and she's submitted a paper which has these results on the left, which show the extensive movements of birds, especially birds from the west coast, outside of the breeding season, which has given us really crucial insights into where we need to place our efforts to mitigate threats during outside of the breeding season. And a very exciting project led by Christina Hagen is the establishment of a new colony at Dunkeld Nature Reserve in a region where there's lots of fish but very little fishing pressure. So this is an ambitious project that made really good progress this year when Christina, in collaboration with SANCOB and Cape Nature, managed to release 88 fledglings that were hand-reared in SANCOB at 3 different periods during the year. And this is in an effort to bolster the potential recruitment of these birds back to this new colony, which we're hoping will be established in the next few years and give these birds another fighting chance.
Nandi Tobela, Empowering People Program Manager. I will be presenting some of the projects within the Empowering People program, beginning with environmental education. Environmental education and awareness is a key component to the Empowering People program, aimed at educating awareness about the environment amongst the youth, school groups, and the community at large. In the Wackerstrom Tourism and Education Center, there is a number of ongoing learning activities linked to this component, such as the Junior Bird Clubs. Through the school outreach over the last year, we were able to interface with 90 learners from the local schools. There has also been collaborations with BirdLife South Africa's regional conservation program in an effort to drive awareness for migratory birds on social media. Further expansions of this project is envisioned in the northern part of KZN, where 2 schools have already been identified. Secondly, under the Evitourism component is the Community Birds Guide project, which seeks to empower and capacitate community members into becoming entrepreneurs and professional bird guides. Over the last year, 7 new community bird guides successfully completed the training, and as part of ongoing support, 10 guides received Canon cameras. There was also a special video feature that involved 17 guides. Lastly, a new working group has been established with the purpose to produce a list of bird names in traditional South African languages. The Indigenous Names for South African Birds working group will pull together and facilitate a multi-diverse team comprised of linguists, ornithologists, and most importantly, those birders traditionally speaking the languages. In so doing, each species name should reflect the language and culture of the people that speak these languages as home languages. There are also opportunities for researchers to publish books and research articles for those wishing to get involved.
Hello everyone, my name is Christian Willem Brink, and I'm going to be telling you about an exciting discovery in our Taito Falcon project. Now, for those who don't know, Taito falcons are these beautiful little falcons on the screen there, and they're very rare. And a recent conservation workshop highlighted that conservation priority for the species needs to be identifying strongholds further afield, as all the populations that are being studied in Southern Africa are showing dramatic declines. So we managed to secure some funding from the Peregrine Fund to go survey Niassa Special Reserve in northern Mozambique, which is this landscape you can see on the screen there. It's a sea of Miombo woodland with these inselbergs jutting out of the landscape. Now, each inselberg is a potential breeding site for Taita falcons, who are cliff nesters. So we managed to recruit this team of esteemed gentlemen shown on the screen there. And we set off to northern Mozambique and started surveying these inselbergs. Now, this pretty much entailed us being ferried via helicopter to inselbergs and setting up shop, scouting out the cliff faces using binoculars and spotting scopes to try and pick up Taita falcons. So this just gives you an idea of the scale of such a task, with a huge cliff face we are planning to survey on the left and the helicopter shown on the screen there dropping off the team. So in the end, after roughly 10 days of surveying, we managed to discover the largest known population of Taita falcons. We recorded about 37 individuals in total, so a very exciting discovery. And on the left there, you can see all the inselbergs that we surveyed. Now, this means that Niassa is definitely a stronghold for Taitas, and there's huge potential across that landscape. But Niassa also has its own problems. There's more than 40,000 people living in the reserve, depending on its natural resources, and leading to some habitat degradation, which may in turn affect Taita falcons. So our next steps are to engage with role players already heavily invested in that landscape to put Taita falcons on their list of priority species, and then also to get an accurate conservation status assessment for the species based on the information we've gathered and future analysis that we plan. So with this work, we hope to shed some light on a species that is at the moment still very unknown and understudied. And with that, I want to say thank you to everyone on the screen who made this work possible, and thank you to you for listening.
My name is Carl Lloyd, and I manage the White-winged Flufftail Conservation Project. I'll be telling you more about the work that we are doing at Middelpunt Wetland, the only confirmed breeding site of the White-winged Flufftail in South Africa. For those who do not know, the white-winged flufftail is listed as critically endangered, and it is considered one of Africa's most threatened and rarest water birds. It is a species that specializes in high elevation wetlands, and we use it as an ambassador or flagship species of wetland conservation. To improve the conservation status of Middelpunt Wetland, we have pursued declaring it a private nature reserve with the landowners. This ensures long-term stewardship commitment and protection from external threats. The nature reserve will comprise 2 landowner groups totaling over 500 hectares. We as BirdLife South Africa and Middelpunt Wetland Trust have entered into a co-management agreement with the landowners to assist with the running of the reserve. The public participation process has recently concluded, and we thank everyone who added their name to our letter of support. Middelpunt Wetland faces threats from being burnt at the incorrect time of year. Previously, it has experienced intense dry winter fires. To combat this, I have worked with the local fire ward and landowners to establish a fire break along the length of the wetland. This will prevent fires from entering the wetland during winter. We are looking at burning the wetland during spring after the first 20 mils of rain to ensure a cool fire. Middelpunt Wetland also faces threats from being trampled by cattle. Cattle disrupt the 3-dimensional structure of the sensitive vegetation layer that is used by water birds. To combat this, I have designed a wildlife-friendly fence by consulting both the literature and farmers on the ground. But we desperately need your help in raising the remaining funds to purchase the materials needed and cover the installation costs. Please consider supporting us by following this link. Thank you.
Seabird Bycatch Challenges and Solutions, a presentation by the Albertus Task Force for the 93rd BirdLife South Africa Annual General Meeting. Two main goals of the Albertus Task Force are, firstly, to sustain our conservation gains through advocacy and legislation, so we can maintain the 95% reductions achieved in the offshore trawl hake fleet that saves over 9,000 birds every year, as well as preventing the potential mortality of close to 2,500 birds in the foreign longline fleet. Secondly, to ensure that all fishing fleets in South Africa implement seabird bycatch mitigation measures as part of a sustainable approach to fishing practices. We are achieving this through multi-stakeholder engagements that address the challenges of implementation and compliance. By working directly with fishers, government, and environmental institutions, we seek to fund research projects that assist industry with the uptake of measures, training, and awareness, as well as the development of innovative tools, and by providing direct incentives to fishers. As an example, the 2-year inshore hake trawl fisheries project is addressing the challenges faced by fishers in implementing mitigation. We are developing and trialing bespoke bird scaring lines, as well as providing incentives to industry by partly funding the fleet's at-sea observer program and ensuring the fishery meets its sustainable resource management targets as part of their Marine Stewardship Council certification. The project is also researching electronic monitoring tools, including the use of cameras and the development of machine learning software aimed at advancing compliance with mitigation in the absence of onboard observers. Key to the success of the ATF is the team's capacity to adapt, as well as a strong combination of advocacy work while maintaining close ties to the fishermen, aimed at ensuring lasting compliance and committed government involvement. We would like to thank the RSPB for supporting our work, as well as for donations and research grants that make our work possible. For more information or to support, please contact me, Andrea Angel, at birdlife.org.za. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. My name is Robin, and I am the Communications Officer and Project Assistant for the Mass-Free Mariine Project. The Mass-Free Mariine Project has been set up by BirdLife South Africa and the South African Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, with the aim to restore South Africa's subantarctic territory, Marion Island, from invasive mice. Marion Island is home to millions of seabirds, many of which are threatened both at sea and also at the island breeding ground of Marion Island. Mice introduced in the 19th century have had devastating impacts on the ecology and biodiversity of Marion, where a warmer and drier climate over the last 30 years has contributed to an increase in mouse densities on the island. This has caused a shortage of their invertebrate food. This shortage of invertebrates has driven mice to find alternative food sources. Mice have begun resorting to eating the chicks, juveniles, and even adult seabirds of Marion Island alive. The Mouse-Free Marion Project is planning an ambitious undertaking to eradicate mice from Marion Island in 2024, thus ensuring a healthy future for Marion Island seabirds. So I am presenting today in the state of Mouse-Free Marion Project Manager, Dr. Anton Wolfart. Anton has just returned from the April takeover voyage to Marion Island. Joining him on this trip was Mouse-Free Marion Project Operations Manager Keith Springer and two newly appointed overwintering research assistants. The main aim of this takeover trip was to conduct important reconnaissance and ground truthing work, and this will feed into the planning of the eradication operation. The team are also conducting bait trials on the island, which will help aid a successful operation. The two overwintering research assistants, Elsa van Ginkel and Vuyawela Simba, will stay at Marion Island until the next takeover voyage in 2023, and will be doing work that will help inform post-eradication monitoring of seabird recovery, among other things. This work is being done jointly with a team at the University of Pretoria and led by Dr. Michelle Grieve. In terms of communicating various aspects of the Mouse-Free Marion project, a lot of effort has been put into increasing the profile of the project. We have recently distributed our first quarterly newsletter, and I've continued with frequent news posts to both our website and social media channels. We've also continued to share the importance of their project to wider audiences through school visits and various other engagement opportunities. So to ensure that this eradication operation can go ahead as planned, a significant amount of funds needs to be raised. The recent BirdLife South Africa flocked Marion voyage has benefited the Mouse-Free Marion project immensely. Along with associated events, the cruise managed to raise about 3 million rand for the Mouse-Free Marion project and has provided valuable fundraising contacts. The Mouse-Free Marion project Chief Philanthropy Officer Heidi Whitman is continuing to meet with supporters around the world to raise the much needed funds to conduct this operation. This project will be a once-off intervention that would see us saving 18 of the 28 species of seabirds breeding at Marion Island that are currently facing local extinction. We consider this to be one of the most important conservation projects that we will take part in, and we look forward to your continued interest in the project.
Good day, everybody. My name is Steve McKean. I'm from the BirdLife South Africa Conservation Outcomes Partnership, working on blue swallow conservation in KwaZulu-Natal, amongst the other things we're doing as well. Just very quickly, Conservation Outcomes is a small NGO, as I said, in partnership with BirdLife South Africa for the last 4 years, working on blue swallow habitat and conservation and population monitoring in KwaZulu-Natal. Some highlights from our work over the last year include securing IUC and SRS funding worth over €33,000, and this enabled us to do quite a few good things, highlight of which is employing 2 full-time monitors for the breeding season, which assisted us greatly. With their help, we managed to find 3 additional active nest sites, which we didn't know about previously, and we recorded over a 38% increase in the number of fledglings monitored over the previous year, which is a definite step forward for blue swallows in KZN. And then we are monitoring over 38 different nest sites in the province, which is a logistical undertaking of some magnitude and requires lots of hands and effort. Then we can't just monitor these birds, we need to look after their habitat and their breeding sites. And highlights from this include declaration of a new Misbelt grassland nature reserve in the Midlands, Kwawula, another 220 hectares that you have legally declared as reserve. We have another one in process as we speak. It's in the public participation process right now, Neroda Nature Reserve, and many of you may know it as Buddhist Retreat in southern KwaZulu-Natal, near Kopo. Prime blue swallow habitat, lots of blue swallows around, well, relatively lots compared to other areas. And yeah, they're in the process at the moment. And then we have another additional roughly 1,450 hectares comprising of 2 different sites, which are in various stages of the process at the moment, and we're wanting to make good progress on those in the next few months. Then importantly, not just securing habitat, but the work starts really in looking after those and supporting landowners and managing them. Alien plants are a major threat to blue swallow breeding habitat and to their nest sites, actually. So to try and assist with this, we facilitated with the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment over 47,000 rands worth of herbicide assistance to landowners, and we were able to combat alien plants in over 4,300 hectares of blue swallow habitat with this assistance at the moment, and we are looking to increase this going forward. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to the annual report for 2021's Conservation Conversations. As your host, Melissa Whitecross, I will be showcasing some of the highlights from our 2021 second season. Christina Hagen joined the hosting team in 2021. Our first webinar of season 2 aired on 19 January with a talk on the bird of the year, the Cape Rock Jumper. Our standout talks of last year were all linked to the AV tourism slot, frequently maxing out the Zoom rooms during the live shows. We ran several theme series on the show, including one on birding sandparks, biodiversity stewardship, and Marion Island. Our YouTube channel continues to grow, and we had over 27,000 views during 2021, and almost 600 new subscribers to our channel. We pay tribute and remember two of our previous presenters, Duncan Butchett and Joe Grossel, who both sadly passed away during 2021. Our thoughts and prayers remain with the families and loved ones. We also hosted the annual Owl Awards, Flufftail Festival, highlights of the virtual African Bird Fair, and a special episode celebrating 25 years of BirdLife South Africa. In 2021, we were able to produce 47 episodes, bringing the total offering of conservation conversations to 81 episodes between 2020 and 2021. Thank you to all of you who tuned in during 2021. Make sure to continue joining us every Tuesday at 7 o'clock for our fun, free Conservation Conversations webinars.
Hi, I'm Alan Lee, Science and Innovation Program Manager at BirdLife South Africa. Together with Shamisa Banda, we'll be talking about the regional red listing process to be undertaken for the birds of South Africa, Lesotho, and Eswatini as part of the process of the revision of the Red Data Book. A reminder as to what red listing is. It's the IUCN list of criteria which determine how close a species is to becoming extinct. Categories include critically endangered species like the white-winged flufftail, endangered for our African penguin, vulnerable for black stork, near threatened for Cory bustard, and least concern for most of the rest of the species. Luckily, we've yet to have any species go extinct, and none are data deficient. The red listing process and the products from that are very important for a range of stakeholders across South Africa, including conservation agencies like sandparks and Cape Nature. We need to know which species need to get their conservation attention in their management regions. Also for government, departments like Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, academic institutions, universities also use the list in order to prioritize species that could do with further research. And then development as well, in order to minimize development footprints and to know which endangered species are in their planning domain. Historically, the red listing process has culminated in book products. The first one was by Keith Barnes, published in 2000. Roughly 10 years later, the process was undertaken again, culminating in 2015 ESCOM Red Data Book of Birds. And information there was synthesized in the State of South Africa's Birds in 2018. So we've started the process again, and many of the products will be digital, so online web pages, and the synthesis of the book, which will contain the conservation stories of researchers and conservationists in order to make the information more accessible to the general public. With that, I hand over to Shamisa.
All right, so here's a look at our progress so far. This year is mainly focused on building the infrastructure required for the red listing process, basically getting everything ready for the data. So far, we have created a species criteria database, which contains all the fields we'll need to fill to assess the extinction risk of species. Based on the database, we are developing an automatic listing tool which will read the data of a species and assign it a threat status based on the criteria met. Very cool. Adding to that, we have a provisional template of what our website, well, what the web hosted assessments could look like. And here is a quick run through. Love the maps. And then onto modeling. Strides have been made with species distribution modeling, leveraging SABAP2 data. Like you saw on the webpage, these are some pretty dynamic and informative maps. This is really important because, as we know, habitats are changing, and distribution is one of the key attributes involved in determining extinction risk. So the final highlight being mentioned today is that we have started amassing a pool of experts who will contribute their expertise to this important project. All in all, very exciting. And thank you for listening.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a great pleasure to be presenting on behalf of the Regional Conservation Program, which is one of the 6 conservation programs in the Conservation Division of BirdLife South Africa. And today I'll be talking to you, I'll be presenting major highlights in terms of the work we are doing to support the implementation of site and habitat-based conservation projects in Africa, using global standards of the IUCN Red List, Key Biodiversity Area, and other effective area-based conservation measures. In 2021, we supported the implementation of the Key Biodiversity Area program of work, where over 100 conservationists were trained in Africa on the application of the IUCN global standards to identify the most important sites for biodiversity, and also supporting these countries and more to identify and map a way forward in terms of establishing the Key Biodiversity Area National Coordination Group, which is a national constituency of species and habitat experts that are much interested in identifying, conserving, and protecting the site. And also, we have reviewed a KBA in Ghana, Atewa Forest, which is a stronghold for bauxite, and many multi-billion-dollar companies are really interested in mining bauxite from this area. But because it was confirmed as a KBA, these companies are now concerned about sourcing bauxite from these important sites for biodiversity. Together with the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, we are also implementing one of the key programs, which is the East Atlantic Flyway Initiative Program, led by Bronwyn Murray. And essentially, this program helps to identify threatened and common birds that use this flyway, and also support BirdLife partners to identify KBAs in this area. And the overall objectives of this flyway program is to understand trends of birds that use this flyway. A key flagship species is the European roller, where a lot is known about the northern breeding site, but little to nothing is known about the species in the overwintering Southern African site. And so a data collection protocol was developed in BirdLassa, where we are using this data to identify population numbers, trends, and pressures of this species. And this protocol is currently being tested in Kruger National Park, including 2 nature reserves, with a hope to expand this into other reserves in 2020 and 2023. Also, the Regional Conservation Program was involved in a whole lot of communication efforts. In 2021, we co-authored a paper in the Journal of Nature, Ecology, and Evolution to develop a new biodiversity matrix, the Species Threat Abatement and Restoration Index, STAR. And STAR really allows us to consistently measure how and where restoration and conservation efforts could have the most significant impact. We also were very much involved in a KBA symposium in 2021 at the International Congress for Conservation Biology, where we showed the growing community of key biodiversity area in Africa, and also very much involved in the World Migratory Bird Day campaign to show the plight of migratory species, including some of the challenges they face. And lastly, we published a newsletter article to the Species Survival Commission network of over 10,000 volunteers to show how they can use Red List information to be able to support the identification of key biodiversity areas.
Good day, dear members. Here follows a summary of some of the important work plans for 2022. The BirdLife South Africa Constitution will be amended to ensure it remains in line with the needs of the organization and its members. In particular, to allow greater representation of the organization's members on its board of directors. The 2022 to 2026 conservation strategy will be finalized. The Landscape Conservation Programme is working towards securing our most threatened habitats through biodiversity stewardship. Work is continuing on several high priority threats to our vultures, raptors, large terrestrial birds, grassland endemics, and wetland communities. The Regional Conservation Programme continues to strengthen conservation partnerships across 8 African countries through capacity building and training. The Seabird Conservation Programme is working hard on the establishment of an effective fishing closure regime around African penguin colonies. An ecosystem-based approach is also being promoted to fisheries to improve the conservation of the endemic seabirds of the Benguela Current. The Empowering People Programme has appointed a program manager with an initial target of establishing a community conservation and education presence in Zululand. A web-based South African birders online tool for aviatourism will also be launched during the year. The Science and Innovation Programme continues to develop innovative tools for conservation planning and monitoring, and a red list assessment process for birds in South Africa, Lesotho and Eswatini has commenced. The Policy and Advocacy Programme aims to integrate conservation objectives into relevant policy and legislation. It continues to support the improved implementation of national and international conservation frameworks. BirdLife South Africa continued to support the Mouse-Free Marion non-profit company as it works toward eradicating mice from Marion Island and restoring the ecology of this sub-Antarctic island. Our recently appointed communications manager works with staff and a marketing committee to improve our public visibility and grow our brand awareness. Priorities of the fundraising committee include ensuring all the core costs are covered, and we still require a long-term funder for our Wakkerstroom Centre and the important environmental education work that is undertaken by its staff. We are also aiming to raise funds for the purchase of a Cape Town office. During 2022, Flock to Marion took nearly 1,500 birders to the Southern Ocean on an unforgettable birding adventure. Several other events will also be hosted this year, including the African Bird Fair, Owl Awards, and Birding Big Day. We continue to produce our world-class African BirdLife magazine, and we are also promoting awareness of the Cape Gannet as Bird of the Year 2022. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark, to you and your team for that annual report. And you'll be able to see and find more details of our work in the annual report when it gets published shortly. I would like to now hand over to Fani du Plessis, our Chief Financial Officer, to present our financial statements that have been audited by KPMG. Over to you, Fani.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Morning, all members. I'm pleased to report that despite the challenging economic conditions experienced over the last 2 years, BirdLife South Africa has achieved a small net income from operations for the 12th consecutive year. The net income from operations for the year ended 31 December 2021 amounted to 67,206 Rand compared to 438,000 Rand the previous year. Let's now look at let me just do the slides. Sorry. So let's now look at how this was achieved. The operating budget of the organization increased by 6.3% from the prior year to just under 32 million. The business division's cost made up 1/3 or 53% of the total budget. We are immensely grateful to our loyal Golden Bird patron donors whose contributions in 2021 were the highest ever. This financial support was key in limiting the challenges caused by the overall decrease in donor income due to the tough economic times, as well as the decrease in interest rates, which affected the return on our cash holdings. In combination, our donors and interest income decreased by approximately 13% to around 4.2 million in 2021. While gross administrative expenses increased by 3% from the prior year, a healthy 23% increase in admin recharges income from the conservation division resulted in an overall 3.5% decrease in net admin costs. The successful annual raffle and virtual African Bird Fair generated a welcome net income of 385,000 Rand from events. Membership net income decreased by 25% to 550,000 Rand. This can be attributed to a decline in membership numbers brought about by the economic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. It is hoped that membership will slowly recover in the years to come. It is worth noting that the net income of membership is roughly equal to the total contribution of 170 Conservation League donors to whom we are very grateful. Publications, mainly consisting of African BirdLife magazine and the Wakkerstrom Center, were two further aspects of our work that were impacted by COVID-19. Rising production costs and a decrease in bulk subscriptions from lodges resulted in a 284,000 loss for the magazine. The Wakkerstrom Center fared better than the prior year, ending with a net loss of 300,000. The improvement was due to a slightly better occupancy rate at the facility. We are still in search of a long-term funder for the Wakkerstrom Center operations and its important environmental education work in the rural areas surrounding the center. We also would like to encourage bird clubs to book outings to the Wakkerstrom Center and to enjoy birding outings with local guides in the area and to enjoy the splendid scenery there. All activities mentioned above are ultimately aimed at supporting BirdLife South Africa's principal objective, the conservation of our country's birds and their habitats. All conservation programs and projects were sufficiently funded during the year. The Conservation Division's costs made up just over 2/3 or 67% of this budget. The overall budget of the Conservation Division increased by 13% to 21.4 million Rand compared to the prior year, reflecting an increase in the important conservation work that we undertake. The fact that income continues to match and indeed exceed the increased costs is a reflection of the sound financial management and good corporate governance of the organization. I would like to express our gratitude to all our donors and funders for their support in ensuring that the organization's activities were funded during the year. Additional to the net income from operations as reported above, several non-operating transactions were also recorded during the year. We received 66,000 Rand in bequests and donations towards the long-term sustainability of the organization. Furthermore, BirdLife South Africa donated 337,000 Rand to the BirdLife National Trust, which, as per board policy, represents the Sustainability Fund bequests and donations received in the prior year. Although this transaction has resulted in BirdLife South Africa reporting a net loss of 204,000 Rand for the year, donations to the Trust will ultimately strengthen BirdLife South Africa. The BirdLife National Trust's sole objective is to receive, manage and invest funds and other assets for the long-term benefit of BirdLife South Africa. The expertise of the Trust's Board of Trustees and our skilled brokers will ensure that the investment portfolio continues to grow optimally for the long-term sustainability of the organization. The financial position of the organization remains healthy. Current assets, mainly comprising of cash and cash equivalents, are sufficient to cover current liabilities. The current liabilities are mainly consisting of project funding received in advance. A concerted effort was undertaken during the financial year to reduce trade receivables. This resulted in an 87% reduction in debtor balances. The trade and other receivable balances are, however, higher than the prior year due to a significant prepayment linked to Flock to Marion, which was undertaken in 2022. Similarly, trade and other payables have also increased since 2020 due to income received in advance for Flock to Marion. The retained earnings balance remains healthy, with sufficient reserves available to cover 9 months' worth of gross admin expenditure. In conclusion, from my side, the annual financial statements have been available for review by members on the organization's website for a few days. These financial statements for the year ending 31 December 2021 have been audited by KPMG and approved by the Board of Directors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fani, to you and your finance team, as well as to Melissa Croft, our honorary treasurer, who wasn't able to join us today, for looking after our finances so well. Could I please ask for a proposer and seconder for adoption of the annual financial statements? David Chamberlain proposed. David Lawrence seconded. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 9, which is the appointment of the external auditors. And I would firstly like to thank David Reid and his audit team from KPMG for the exemplary way in which our audit has been carried out. Our Audit and Risk Committee have recommended to the board that KPMG be reappointed for another year. And could I please ask this meeting for a proposer and seconder for the reappointment of KPMG, please? Khaliboy, Sapori, and Yvonne Pennington. Thank you very much. We now move on to the very important item on the agenda, which is the nomination and election of office bearers. The first item that we need to deal with is the appointment of our honorary treasurer. I'd like to announce that Manuela Kroch, whose term has come to an end at this AGM, has agreed to stand for another term, and the board is happy to propose that Manuela take up the position for a further term. Could I just ask for a proposer and seconder for that, please? Linda Hart and David Chamberlain. Thank you very much, and thanks, Manuela, for accepting to serve a further term. As previously mentioned at our special general meeting on the 10th of March, various changes to BirdLife South Africa's constitution were approved, one of which was for the election of 4 members directors to the board. This is to allow for greater representation of our membership on the board of directors, and we invited nominations for the 4 members directors positions, and we were delighted to receive nominations for excellent candidates. I would like to thank Imran Bonka, our independent chairperson, and his nominations committee members for the exemplary way in which the nominations process was executed. Short biographies of the 5 nominees have been circulated to you, and you can also see their photographs on the screen. And it is now time for that all-important voting process. The 5 nominees, just to recap, are Matthew Biden, Dr. Louise Coetzee, Nicolette Forbes, Sean Overmeyer, and Yvonne Pennington, all of whom have excellent credentials to serve on our board, and I wish them all the best of luck. Please ensure that when you vote, that you only select 4 of the 5 candidates, or a maximum of 4 of the 5 candidates on your voting screen, as selecting all 5 will make your vote null and void. It's also important to note that only direct members have the vote, but members of affiliated bird clubs who are not members of South Africa, BirdLife South Africa, are not entitled to the vote. We do, however, allow each affiliated bird club to have 1 vote. And if you are a mandated representative of a club and you wish to vote, I would suggest that you just enter in the chat box which club you are representing so that we can take your vote into account. We will now pause for a few minutes for you to consider and finalize your choice of candidates using the voting screen. After this, we will collate the votes and verify the voting process, and a verification process will take place to ensure that all votes are valid. The results of the election will be announced before we close the meeting today. So we're just going to pause for a few minutes to allow you to do that process, please.
I think we're going to give everybody another few seconds to vote, and we will close the voting. Okay, good. Thanks, Melissa. You can close that screen. Thank you. And thanks very much, everybody, for voting. We will be verifying that the people who have voted are members of BirdLife South Africa, and we will be announcing the 4 selected candidates at the end of the meeting. Okay, I will take over from here briefly. We've point 11 on the agenda is just presentation on some of BirdLife South Africa's initiatives and publications, and we have a short recording as well. Some of our staff are going to just present on this.
Hello everyone, I'm very pleased to be able to present on Cape Gannet, the bird of the year for 2023. Cape Gannets are fairly large seabirds with wingspan of just under 1 meter and weighing in at about 2.8 kilograms. They are distinctive white birds with yellow heads and black wingtips and tail tip. Their most striking feature, I think, is the blue eyes surrounding a pale iris. The fledglings are black with white speckles, and they molt sequentially over the years into their adult plumage by the time they're 3 to 4 years old. Gannets are well known for their spectacular feeding techniques. They're the ultimate plunge divers. Once they've located a school of fish, they fly high above it and then abruptly plunge into the water, folding their wings back. They can hit the water at speeds of up to 100 kilometers an hour, which they're able to do because they have special air sacs in their chests to help cushion the blow. They feed mostly on small schooling fish like sardine and anchovy. Cape Gannets are endemic to South Africa and Namibia, and there are only 6 colonies in the world, 3 in Namibia and 3 in South Africa. Their current population size is around 120,000 breeding pairs, which is down by over 50% compared to 20 years ago. The bulk of the population used to be in Namibia in the 1950s and 60s, but following the sardine stock collapse the population has decreased to very low levels. Over 70% of the global population is now found on Bird Island in Algoa Bay. These decreases are due to a number of threats. As I mentioned, the Namibian population decreased due to a lack of food, and that is also the major threat in South Africa, but for a different reason. Here, the stocks did not collapse, but they shifted in their distribution. Historically, most of the sardine and anchovy were found on the west coast, but since the mid-90s, the distribution has mainly been on the southern Cape Coast, and this has caused the decreases in the west coast colonies. The food scarcity has driven another problem for the gannets. A lot of them now forage behind fishing vessels on fishery discards. This is what we call junk food, as the hake discards are not as nutritious as sardine and anchovy, and chicks fed on a diet of discards grow much more slowly and have a lower survival rate. Another problem with foraging behind fishing vessels is the threat of bycatch. Gannets can either get entangled in the net as they dive into it after the fish, or collide with the trawl warp cable that drags the net behind the boat. Other threats include climate change due to heat waves and increasing frequency and intensity of storms, which can flood the low-lying islands. Kelp gull and great white pelican predation on eggs and chicks can be a problem on all the colonies. Seal predation and displacement on the adults is a problem, especially on the west coast at Malcos Island. And then there's the ever-present threat of oil spills and disease outbreaks. While there are a lot of threats facing the gannets, there are also a lot of conservation actions. The first is marine spatial planning. This involves identifying important foraging areas for Cape gannets and advocating for greater protection in those areas. As you can see on the photo on the left, we use miniature GPS trackers to know where the gannets go. BirdLife South Africa will soon be starting a new program looking at where the gannets go outside the breeding season. This is a major gap in our knowledge, and the information that we gather will enable us to advocate for marine protected areas and changes to fisheries management, as well as fighting against activities such as marine mining. Another important conservation action has been driven by the Albatross Task Force, and that is bycatch mitigation. Mainly through the use of bird scaring lines, the bycatch of gannets and other seabirds has been reduced dramatically. There are also very good predator management programs, mainly on the West Coast, targeting seals and great white pelicans. There's the very successful Pelican Watch program that has been running for a number of years. As part of our Bird of the Year initiative, we are developing a number of resources, posters, infographics, and lesson plans. These are being developed by the talented Lee Volfart, and I'd urge you to go to our website and download them. We also have a range of Bird of the Year merchandise, t-shirts, soft toys, and lapel pins. Please go to shop.birdlife.org.za and take a look. And finally, we'd like to thank the Hans Voorhausen Charitable Trust for sponsoring the Bird of the Year initiative.
Hello everyone, my name is Abigail Ramodzuli and I will be giving an update on the checklist of birds in South Africa. This is presented on behalf of BirdLife South Africa List Committee chaired by Dr. Chris Lords. The 2022 checklists were published in January of this year, and the checklists are available in a PDF and Microsoft Excel format. Several versions are available. You'll find a general checklist, an endemic checklist, a rare data species list, a clean list that can be linked to statistical and GIS software. These checklists can be downloaded at the link that is shown. The 2022 checklist numbers were also updated. The total species list for South African birds now stands at 877. The following species were added to the list: crested honey buzzard, the sooty gull, red rum swallow, and the lesser white-throat. The red list data also changed for some of the birds. The Damara 10 was globally vulnerable, it's now least concern. Makua duck was globally vulnerable, now it's to endangered. Crowned cormorant, globally near threatened to least concern. Chestnut-banded plover, globally near threatened to least concern. African skimmer, globally near threatened to least concern. Cape vulture, globally endangered to vulnerable. The red-footed falcon, globally near threatened to vulnerable. The spotted ground thrush, globally endangered to vulnerable. Madagascar pranticore, globally vulnerable to near threatened. BirdLife South Africa would also like to thank the committee for their hard work to maintain the checklist. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Andrew de Block and I'm the Aviary Tourism Project Manager here at BirdLife South Africa. And today I'm going to be talking to you about an exciting new platform that we're launching called Go Birding, which is a freely accessible service for birders, both domestic and inbound, about birding in South Africa. And I think it's set to capitalize the aviary tourism industry in South Africa. Aviary tourism in South Africa is an up-and-coming niche tourism sector. South Africa has over 870 bird species, and with nearly 50 of these found nowhere else in the world, this makes South Africa one of the most exciting birding destinations to visit worldwide. Birding in South Africa is also supported by a well-established ecotourism industry, which provides certain infrastructure. Birding brings tourism income to rural under-visited areas as well, as opposed to other niche tourism sectors. Although the market is largely untapped, and this is especially in the domestic forum, and this is because there is a lack of organization around aviary tourism, especially hamstrung by a lack of information about where to go birding and who are the local service providers. So BirdLife South Africa took the decision to integrate all of our aviary tourism work, which includes our community bird guide project, where we have 50 guides spread across the northeast of South Africa that supply local services, as well as our network of recommended accommodations, tour operators and course providers who are vetted AV tourism service providers for BirdLife South Africa, as well as our birding site information, which required an update. And we put this all onto an integrated platform and called it Go Birding. So with no further delays, I'm going to show you the exceptional new platform that we launched. So if you head to gobirding.birdlife.org.za, you will find our platform, and this is what you will be greeted with. Here is our integrated map, and it features over 500 pins of information on birding sites, accommodations, and community bird guides across South Africa. So for instance, if you want to plan a trip to Glinza Forest to see an eastern bronze-necked pigeon, we'll zoom in here on Eshowe and Glinza Forest. If you click on the blue pin, which are our accommodations, you will find the photograph, the title, a bit of a teaser, and if you click to see some more, here is our dedicated web page for the site, including who the management authorities, some pictures, key species to be seen, contact details, and then some informative sections about the birding, which you can toggle to read more, about the birding site, and then other related information such as directions and the like. Then if we want to go back to the main page, click out of the site, we have our green pins, which are our accommodations, for instance, the Birds of Paradise guest house. And again, you can click through for more information. And then if you want to click through on one of our community bird guides, for example, Mabui Zungu, this will give you her operating areas. And again, if you click through, she has a dedicated web page, which will give you her contact details, a bit of a bio, and then some of our guides even have a meet the guide video that you can watch as well before you even made use of their services. So if we zoom out just so you can see again just how impressive this map is. Each of these pins, as I mentioned, just over 500 of them, has dedicated web pages with all the information you could possibly need, whether you're a local birder or visiting birder to South Africa. I hope that people find this platform useful and that it becomes the Birder's Bible. Thank you.
Good, thanks very much. I'd also like to thank David Chamberlain for sponsoring the Go Birding initiative, the platform as well. Darby, those funds have been very useful, and I think this is an important product that we've developed. Just a couple of announcements around events from me. The important one is about to be announced, but we'll be going down to Wilderness for our AGM next year, next May. Details will be sent to our members during the rest of the year and early next year. We're very pleased to be hosting our Flock to the Wilderness in collaboration with Lakes Bird Club and BirdLife Plet, as well as Nature's Valley Trust. So thanks very much to our colleagues down in the Southern Cape. It'll be done in conjunction with a Learn About Birds conference. We'll have the usual layman's birds conference and the science lab. And so there'll be quite a lot for everybody. And in addition to the lectures and workshops, there'll also be opportunities to go birding with some of the local experts. We had a very successful event, and that's the 2021 logo, earlier this year, Flock to Marion, and we've decided that these flocks at sea are so exceptional, provide unique opportunities for our members and for birders. We're going to go to sea again at the end of next year. In late October, early November, dates still to be determined, we're going to be going up the Mozambique Channel on the MSC ship, probably going to be the MSC Orchestra. We'll again have a large number of guides on board, and really good birds can be seen. We depart from Durban, return to Durban, and the plan is to have 5 nights at sea. A little bit later, in a few minutes' time, there'll be just a little bit more discussion around some of the species that can be seen during that voyage. So all very exciting, and I'd really like to encourage everybody who's joined the AGM to join us on the MSC Orchestra next year for our Flock, the Mozambique Channel. And this is where we'll be going, up to Europa Island and Basada, India, and really good birds, as I said. And apparently Basada, India is within Southern African waters. For the Southern African listers, will be able to tick species in their list as we sail around that island. And then just the last thing, we initiated a really exciting project about being patriotic towards our country and loving our country's birds. And this flag was developed by Mel Tripp and his colleagues. We're animating it, and it's been also going to be put up on billboards, which will be made available around Gauteng in the next next week or so. You'll also be able to buy our bracelets as well, which kind of sport the colours of the South African flag. So those are our initiatives, and I'd like to thank our team for their presentations.
Thank you very much, Mark, and what an exciting announcement. Looking forward to 2023. Item 12 on the agenda, I'm happy to report that there are no resolutions for us to have to deal with today, so we can immediately move on to item 13, which is the presentation of the Gill Memorial Medal, and I'm going to hand over to Mark to introduce the presentation. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks. Okay, again, Anusha has pre-recorded the reading of the citation. She will join us at the end of the reading, so I'm going to play the recording in a moment. But just to remind you that the Gill Memorial Medal is South Africa's, BirdLife South Africa's, and probably Africa's most significant conservation or ornithological award. It's been presented 25 times until today, starting in 1960 with Jack Winterbottom. And you will see the people on that list really represent some of the most prestigious ornithologists our country has seen. The recipients receive a beautiful medal as well as a framed certificate. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Anusha and her presentation.
Good morning, everyone. It is a real pleasure for me to read the citation of our BirdLife South Africa's Gill Memorial Medalist for 2022, who is none other than Professor Peter Ryan. As most of you know, Peter Ryan is director of the Percy Fitzpatrick Institute at the University of Cape Town. Peter's career has combined the highest scientific distinction with a genuine impact on bird conservation. He is well known to Southern Africa's birding community as an author and editor of classic field guides and handbooks, including, most weightily, the 7th edition of Robert's Birds of Southern Africa. He's also known as a prolific and authoritative writer and photographer for African BirdLife magazine, and as a former honorary president of BirdLife South Africa. Peter's phenomenal energy and productivity stem from a total passion for birds, for Africa and its surrounding oceans, and for mentoring and training the next generation of ornithologists and conservationists. Peter's international distinction as a scientist is hard to overstate. He has made particularly important contributions to the fields of seabird ecology, marine plastic pollution and its impacts on seabirds, mitigation of bycatch by fisheries, and on the evolution of oceanic island birds. Aside from this distinctly marine flavor, Peter has also led important work on the systematics and phylogeography of continental African birds and on the effects of energy infrastructures such as wind turbines and power lines on land birds. Peter's intellectual heart is definitely at sea. He has a long-standing passion for Tristan Archipelago, which is about 2,800 kilometers west of Cape Town, and in particular for Inaccessible Island, which he visited as a young student in 1984. This was to be the beginning of his nearly 40 years and counting of long-term studies and conservation efforts, which made a pivotal contribution towards Inaccessible Island being declared a nature reserve in 1997. And together with Gough Island, a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2005. Peter's research year has yielded fascinating and diverse findings, from revealing how the island's finch species have independently speciated ecologically on inaccessible and nearby Nightingale Islands to specialize on the seas available at those islands. This work was published in the high-ranking scientific journal called Science in 2007. He also published and demonstrated how Most oceanic plastic pollution comes from ships rather than land-based sources, with important implications for mitigating this threat to marine life. This work was published in PNAS, which is the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, in 2019. Marine plastics and the impact on wildlife have fascinated Peter for decades before their current prominence in the public and scientific consciousness. His studies began during his master's in the mid-1980s, when he studied the effects of plastic ingestion in seabirds. Many of his recent efforts together with his students have focused on understanding the sources and fates of plastics at sea, directly informing conservation policy. Some of this research has been conducted in collaboration with his wife, marine scientist Colleen Maloney, herself a distinguished UCT academic. One of Peter's qualities that most inspires awe in his academic colleagues is his sheer productivity. He routinely publishes more than 30 scientific papers a year, many of these in high-ranking international scientific journals. About a third of his papers have one of his postgraduate students as first author, which indicates Peter's dedication to ensuring that his students publish and thrive in the tough world of academia. Peter sustains this remarkable level of scientific productivity alongside his popular science writing, membership and leadership of multiple international steering committees, teaching on several courses at UCT, and spending significant amount of time collecting his own data in the field. In recent years, this has included surveying plastic pollution in some of the world's remotest oceans and shores in the Antarctic and Arctic, and playing a leading role in the mouse eradication program on Gough Island and imminently Marion Island. Nonetheless, Peter is somehow able to ensure he begins most days at home on the Cape Peninsula with the surf below his house, or otherwise a survey of his long-term bird monitoring plots in the fynbos-covered mountain slopes above it. As his colleagues, we wonder how is he able to do all of this, and what is the secret to his phenomenal focus? Peter's depth of knowledge and clarity of vision also make him a brilliant communicator of ornithology. His crisp writing, clear and pacey talks, and superb photography, as illustrated in these wonderful pictures that I am showing, are always inspiring. These qualities also make him an insightful and exacting editor, and he has mentored generations of students in raising their games as writers and presenters. Peter has supervised over 100 UCT, PhD, and master's projects. This is truly a staggering number. His students have been inspired not only by his passion for birds and conservation, his fearsome intellect, meticulous approach to science, and deep knowledge of ornithology and ecology, but also by his sense of adventure and fun. A field trip with Peter always results in not only a better understanding of the world, but typically also some wonderful stories. One of Peter's most enduring contributions to African ornithology and conservation has been his founding leadership of the Percy Fitzpatrick Institute's master's course in conservation biology, which he led for 22 years. This course has helped to train and launch the careers of hundreds of African scientists alongside hundreds from elsewhere in the world. Seeing its graduates provide expertise and leadership to conservation efforts throughout Africa and beyond has rightly given Peter great satisfaction. Peter's exceptional scientific achievements have been widely recognized. He is the first and still the only ornithologist to have received an A rating from the National Research Foundation of South Africa, putting him in a select group of the country's best scientists who are regarded as world leaders in the field. He was also awarded the Gilchrist Memorial Medal for his contribution to marine science and elected a Fellow of the Royal Society of South Africa. It is hard to think of anyone more deserving of the BirdLife South Africa's Gill Memorial Medal. Peter became director of the Fitzpatrick Institute of African Ornithology in 2014, following Professor Phil Hockey's untimely death. In his 8 years as director, he has contributed enormously to maintaining and raising the Institute's excellent international standing. He will retire as director at the end of 2022, and he will be sorely missed. He intends to remain active in research, and knowing him, we can be rest assured that he will be more active than ever. As a community, we will no doubt continue for decades to come to be inspired and more than a little awed by his knowledge, productivity, and insight. Congratulations, Peter. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Anusha. You're going to join us for a moment, just to hand over to Peter.
Yes, can you hear me?
I hear you well, thank you.
Yes. Well, Peter, I just want to say how incredibly proud you make us all. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all your efforts in bird conservation and for all that you do in educating and promoting a love of birds for the next generation. So thank you so much. I would like to call on Peter to now do a presentation. And Peter's going to do this live.
Thanks,
Thanks very much, Anusha. Sorry, Mark.
I just wanted to say thanks, Anusha, for the beautiful citation, all the effort you put into preparing that. And from all of us at BirdLife South Africa, congratulations, Peter. We really enjoy working with you and we value the incredible support we receive from you. So Peter, Melissa's going to allow you to share your screen, or you can share your slides.
Mark, if you'll just stop sharing your slides, please.
Okay, let's see if we can do this. Right. How's that looking? Well, thanks, Anusha, and my colleagues who so kindly nominated me for this singular award. It's a great honor to receive and to join the list of past recipients. It's really a great group of people to be able to say that I am a fellow of the Gill medals. So the award is given for a lifetime contribution to ornithology. So I thought I'd kick off by showing you what a lifetime of ornithology does to you. Or maybe it was the beer drinking, but perhaps not the prettiest of sights. Why doesn't my thing want to work? Let's see. So I think I just want to kind of pay tribute really in this talk to the many people who've helped me along the way, and probably first among those was John Cooper. I first met John when I was still a schoolboy in Fishhook, starting to do beach patrols for John, and then after that got into coastal shorebird surveys with John. I spent many a happy undergraduate vacation traveling around the country doing shorebird counts. And John taught me an awful lot about a lot of things and definitely shaped what I was to become. Another pivotal person in my development as an early student was Rory Wilson, who I had the great privilege of working with when Rory was a PhD student living on Marcus Island. John would send me up there for weeks on end to go and help Rory do various strange things with penguins. And this led to my first real scientific publication on partial head molting penguins. And for any of you who've had the privilege to meet Rory, he's the most amazingly enthusiastic and brilliant individual. And it was just incredibly stimulating to spend time with someone who was so intelligent at that young stage of my career. I also benefited considerably from Phil Hockey's tutelage. He supervised my honors project, and then we were able to go on an expedition to Chile together. And Phil was always very pragmatic in the field. He could always see opportunities. I think in 5 weeks in Chile, we ended up with about 6 or 7 papers because largely due to Phil's insights as to what would work. He was really a great guy. And then Richard Brooke gave me a strong appreciation of the bird in the hand. So from our early beach survey work, the joys of measuring birds and learning about their molt, which I've carried through my career. I think that's been really helpful. After finishing my honours degree, I signed up for a master's project with John and Roy Siegfried, looking at the impacts of plastic ingestion on seabirds. And I'll freely admit that it wasn't a topic that particularly interested me at the time. It was purely a vehicle to get me to go to Gough Island and Marion Island. And this is a rather enthusiastic young Ryan hugging Barry Watkins with John Cooper on the right there, Jim Enticott and Stevie Brawny on my first trip to Gough almost 40 years ago. So I duly spent a couple of years documenting the impact of plastic on seabirds, and many of those papers are still the sort of benchmark for the impacts of plastic on seabirds. But because there was very little work being done on plastics at the time, we also started monitoring plastics around the coast of South Africa. This work was done with my wife, Colleen, and we've continued this work ever since. And it's formed the basis of a really nice long-term study. And I think for any young students coming through, one of the lessons that I try to impart on them is to start long-term studies as soon as possible. We live in this time of unprecedented global change, and it's really important to have a good record of how the planet is changing. And I continue this work today. Given the high profile of plastics in the environment, I've been doing quite a lot of work, not so much on the impacts. I think we know there are lots of impacts of plastic on the environment. It's more focused on how can we actually address the problem, and part of that is knowing where the litter comes from and what happens to it once it gets out into the environment. After finishing my master's degree, I was very fortunate to go to Antarctica for a season to do a biological survey. Just an amazing opportunity for a young scientist. And again, I would encourage any young aspiring ornithologists to grasp opportunities and always look for don't think that science is a narrowly focused, hypothesis-driven thing. You must take every opportunity you have, look for interesting questions and pursue them. When it came to my PhD, I was very fortunate to have a freestanding bursary that allowed me to pursue pretty much anything I wanted to do. And that's quite a tricky thing, because when you have lots of choices, it's often hard to decide. And I ended up going back to Inaccessible Island to study the finches there. This was based on some initial observations by Mike Fraser, who suggested that there was perhaps some incipient speciation going on within the small-billed finches on the island. It entailed a lot of measuring of finches and relating their bill size to their diet, so a sort of a mini Galapagos finch type radiation. And in this regard, I was extremely fortunate to have Sue Milton and Richard Dean accompany our initial trip for the PhD work. Sue helped me identify most of the plants on the island, and Richard, just for his depth of ornithological knowledge, himself a past recipient of the award. He's still the only person I know who's actually found an inaccessible island rail nest, and he was only on the island for a few weeks. After finishing my PhD, I had a short stint in California, and then was very fortunate to be recruited to come back and head up the conservation biology course at UCT. So there's Tim Crow, who set up this course. He ran it in 1992 and decided that it was much too much like hard work. So he convinced the university that they needed to appoint a junior lecturer to do the day-to-day running of the course. And that was my bread and butter for the next 20 years. And it's been an amazing experience. One of the joys of being an academic is you get to interact with just an amazing array of young and enthusiastic and brilliant students. And they certainly keep you on your toes and help keep you relatively youthful, although at times you do feel a bit old. Many of these students have gone on to do really cool things. I'll just highlight here Jess Shaw for all of her work on the power lines, just to show that we do things other than work on seabirds. And when I came back to take up this position, I did continue some systematic work looking at larks, Had a lot of fun trying to sort out the tangled mess that was the Karoo lark complex and the long-billed lark complexes. And I also got quite involved in some quite fun exploration work in northern Mozambique, going to Mount Namuli with Claire Spottiswoode and Callan Cohen, John Graham, to go and rediscover Namulia palus. And at this time, I was very fortunate to work with Ian Sinclair on a series of bird identification guides, including the Birds of Africa, sponsored by Darby Chamberlain, which was really a great project just to give an overview of the diversity of birds on the continent. And I'd really like to thank Pippa Parker and the team at Strike Nature for all their support over the years in producing a whole array of really, I think, top-class field guides, although perhaps a little self-serving to say that. And while we're talking about popularizing science, I think we really can't underestimate the role played by Eve Gracie and Bryony van Wyk, the sort of core team responsible for Africa Birds and Birding originally, and now African BirdLife. They're huge servants to ornithology and bird watching in the region. And I'm not sure what we're going to do when Eve finally decides that she has to retire, but she's just been an amazing stalwart and a really lovely person to work with. But behind all this, I kind of inherited John Cooper's long-term studies on Marion Island. So unfortunately, John was laid off as the Antarctic officer. There was a sort of think in the way that the South African National Antarctic Program operated, and they cancelled the positions of Antarctic officers. And the FITS was left with needing somebody to try to maintain these long-term studies. And so I was successful in raising the funds necessary to keep the fieldwork on Marion Island going in collaboration with colleagues from the then Department of Environment Affairs, and more recently colleagues like Maël Cohen here and Pierre Pistorius at Nelson Mandela University. And I was pulled really into the forefront of the sort of fishing impact side of things by Ian MacDonald from WWF, who gave us some money to look at trying to assess the impacts of longline fishing initially, and then working with BirdLife Albatross Task Force to come up with mitigation measures to reduce mortality in trawl fisheries as well. Obviously very gratifying to come up with solutions that could make a real difference. We've also, largely through my students, contributed to large-scale programs identifying key foraging areas for seabirds, tracking their distributions across ocean basins. Seabirds really are international organisms. They don't follow geopolitical boundaries. This is just showing the foraging ranges of breeding seabirds from Tristan and Gough. And you can see that they span the entire South Atlantic, even while they are breeding. And then obviously when they finish breeding, they can range even more wide. And through work like assessing population trends in seabirds, it gave me an excuse to get back to Inaccessible Island. So in monitoring the recovery of spectacled petrels, which has been nothing less than spectacular. And that's allowed me to continue some of my finch work there, just to see what's been happening with the very dynamic evolutionary situation on the island. And when you go to these places, it's such a privilege, one has to give back. So been quite involved in some restoration work on the islands. And this was a collaboration with Working for Water. We went to go and deal with invasive New Zealand flax on Inaccessible and Nightingale. And that's an ongoing program, but we've certainly, if not completely eliminated the species, we've certainly stopped its spread and greatly reduced its footprint on the island. But the biggest restoration problem has always been introduced predators and their impacts on seabirds. And through the collaboration with the RSPB and Richard Cuthbert, we discovered the impact of mice on Gough Island. And here's Richard with John Parks. John Parks was a New Zealand expert who came over to assess the feasibility initially of doing an eradication for mice on Gough. And Richard and I co-led a project assessing whether we thought we could actually remove mice from the island. This culminated in 2021, finally, with a major operation led by the RSPB, 4 helicopters, 200 tons of bait, and everything seemed to go swimmingly well until I got the devastating news in December last year that a mouse had been photographed on the island, and since then there have been many more sightings of mice. So it's clear now that that eradication attempt has failed. I must say it was extremely depressing. I was in ORT when Mark phoned me to say he's got devastating news, and I really couldn't think of anything that was particularly devastating that Mark could tell me until he told me that they'd photographed a mouse on Gough, and it was really like a blow to the gut, and I'm still sort of recovering from it. I'm not sure we'll ever recover from it, but we have to go on, and I think as I say in the latest African BirdLife magazine, we can either throw up our hands and give up, or we can move forward. And I think we really can't afford to throw up our hands, and we do have to move forward. And we are doing so with the Mouse-Free Marion project. South Africa is home, well, Marion Island is home to 1/4 of the world's wandering albatrosses, and we cannot stand by and watch them being slowly nibbled away by mice. So I'd like to thank, in particular, my many students and colleagues I've worked with over the years. A lifetime contribution doesn't come in isolation. It comes through collaboration and supervision of some really wonderful people. There's a couple of my students and colleagues on Marion Island, often doing field work under pretty unpleasant conditions, out at night, working on burrowing petrels. It's cold and wet and miserable, and yet they always do it with a smile. Yeah, it's a great privilege to work with them. And then Mark just asked me to say a few words about the planned flock to the Mozambique Channel. I was fortunate to be up in the Mozambique Channel for a few days last month. It was supposed to be for longer, but we ended up spending most of our time off Durban, where we were unhappily witness to the large amounts of debris that's been pumped into the sea by the floods in Durban. Not surprisingly, huge amounts of debris washing up on the beaches, but a significant amount heading out into the sea. And we were able to document how it's spreading down the coast in a plume. So that's quite interesting. But up in the Mozambique Channel, we were treated to some quite good bird watching. Obviously, the tropics are not ever going to compare with the Southern Ocean, but certainly around Europa. I think Europa is one of the underrated seabirds islands of the world. Big colony of red-footed boobies, both species of frigate bird, large colonies of terns, sooty terns, and both species of tropic bird. So, and a reasonably sizable population of balons, or the local form of tropical shearwater. So it really is quite an impressive place to visit. The red-footed boobies love eating the flying fish, which are in abundance in the Mozambique Channel. It was really striking how much more diverse the flying fish are in the Mozambique Channel than further east in the Indian Ocean. We sailed from Reunion, and much less diversity there. And the redfoots just delight in catching the flying fish that are flushed by the ship. So we would have anything up to 6 or 7 red-footed boobies riding alongside the bow of the ship, waiting for flying fish to take flight, and then they would swoop down and scoop them up. But which was kind of sad, because the flying fish themselves are pretty spectacular in their own way. Huge diversity of forms in the Mozambique Channel, some really spectacularly beautiful species, and of course quite large numbers of flying squid as well, which we saw on the last few days on the flock to Marion this year. So I'm hoping that you will consider joining the flock to the Mozambique Channel. Don't expect huge numbers of birds, but the birds you do see could be quite exciting. I was just chatting to Matthew Lecour at the University of Reunion. He was saying that they've been tracking Reunion black petrels now, and November Reunion black petrels, like Barrow's petrels, The males move around the southern tip of Madagascar into the Mozambique Channel on their sort of pre-laying exodus. So November is really the right time to be in the Mozambique Channel. It's when all of the breeding species in the Indian Ocean are sort of at their peak. Like in April, we didn't see a single Barrow's petrel, even though we sailed to and from Reunion, they're away. But in November, that's when they're in the Mozambique Channel. So we're almost guaranteed to see Barrow's petrel. And there's always a chance of something exotic like a Reunion black petrel, which would be really exciting. Mark, I think I've taken up more than enough time. Just to finish, thanks again so much for the huge honor of being nominated and being given this award. It really means such a lot to me. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Peter, and well done again from all of us at BirdLife South Africa. We really congratulate you and acknowledge all the great work you've done, and thank you for the extensive collaborations that BirdLife South Africa has with the FITS.
Congratulations, Peter, on this incredibly well-deserved award. We now move on to any other business. Mark, is there any other business that we need to attend to?
I'm not aware of anything else besides the announcement of the.
Okay. Yes, then I'd like to now hand over to our verification team, Melissa Whitecross and Shireen Gould. Melissa and Shireen, are you ready to share with us the outcome of the members' directors election process?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We certainly are. So without further ado, we have audited the results, and our 4 members directors are the following. Congratulations, Matthew Biden, Dr. Louise Coetzee, Nicolette Forbes, and Yvonne Pennington, who have all successfully been voted. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to the 4 of you. We will be in contact with you shortly with regard to the onboarding you through the board induction program. So that will happen in the next couple of weeks. But welcome to the board. We really look forward to having you with us for the next 4 years. Before closing, I'd like to express my gratitude to Melissa Whitecross, to Shireen Gould and Isabel Himan for their presence and support this morning. It's really greatly appreciated. And I would also then thank you very much for your time, taking the time to be with us this morning. I wish you all a safe, healthy and birdful time until we meet again down in the wilderness in a year's time. Over to you, Mark, for the meeting closure.
Okay, thanks very much, Philip. And just, I think we all need to acknowledge the enormous contributions that you make as our chairman. I certainly value working with you and your wise counsel on so many occasions. So thank you for all you do for our organization. Thanks to the board as well, many of them in the room with us here in Isdell House, and thanks to all of our members who've attended this AGM. We're going to close down the meeting in a moment, and we hope to see many of you in Wilderness in May 2023. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.